Welcome to episode 127 of the Quick Time Event Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime, John.
That would be me.
Quick Time Event is a chance for John and I to get together each and every week to talk about all of the nerdy things that we love. If you like what you hear, you can find us live on twitch.tv/QuickTimeEvent_. Or on all of your favorite podcast services all across the internet shortly after the live show ends. I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, that was a slightly different intro than normal.
A little bit, and
even I was caught off guard.
We'll talk about that a little bit in a second, because
Sure.
We have some things to talk about. Mainly Game of the Year. It is our Game of the Year podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to give you our top 10 lists. That is going to be the topic of the show. But before we get to that, John, this podcast has historically run very long. However, over the course of the last year or so, we've just become more long-winded. And now we average about 2 hours an episode. That's
I don't know. Is that, are we getting better or worse is my question.
The thing is, I think our conversation is much better than it was when we first started. And
sure.
When we first started, I think initially we thought like an hour. And then after we did like 10, it was like an hour 30. And then for a good, 90 episodes or whatever, we stuck to an hour 30 to like an hour 45. And now, like, ever since we came back from the pandemic, it's just been 2 hours every single week.
Honestly, it's probably because, like, I'm guessing, at least at a subconscious level, we miss, like, social interaction so much. And we're just like, I like talking to a person that either isn't in this house or, like I would normally have to make plans to go see.
Sure. That's probably part of it. Like, subconsciously, we're just like, hey, human interaction. That's not about work. But on the other hand, like, we talked about this a couple times, but like this year has just been news-wise crazy with the launch of the console, with like all of the shitty stuff that was happening in the games industry, with crunch and with all of this other stuff. Like, there's just been a lot to talk about.
It's true.
And I think this is the real culprit, is that maybe, and this is what I think maybe we should think about doing going forward, is the beginning of the show, limiting down some of that discussion about what we've been up to.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
I think the start of the show is 100% because of the lack of human interaction.
Yeah,
where we're just like, oh my god, I can tell somebody about what I've been doing for the last 7 days.
Yes. So with that said, I want to start the show how we always do. However, I don't want to repeat stuff when we're doing Game of the Year.
No.
So
I'm gonna keep mine short and sweet.
Have you been doing anything over the last week other than stuff you will be talking about during the Game of the Year discussion?
So, I feel like I watched 2 movies. Did I talk about watching Ratatouille on here?
You did.
I think I did.
Yes.
So I then after watched the new, I don't remember if I mentioned this. If not, it's not going to take long. The new Pixar movie Soul.
No, but we watched that too.
I didn't know what I was like. I had seen, basically the extent of my knowledge going into that movie was seeing the like essentially billboard advertisement for it on the internet every once in a while. Had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't expect what I got, though, that being said.
Good or bad?
In the middle?
Yeah.
I think because we know plenty of people who are in like the music education field. And so I saw a lot of them posting about it, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a heartwarming movie about a music teacher who maybe like starts out really almost self-centered and wants to focus on them and then ends up focusing on other people. And I mean, maybe that's part of it, but that was not the point of the movie. It didn't feel like, or if it was in a roundabout way that I did not expect.
Yeah. I agree. It was very middle of the road to me. It was not like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like the last time I went into a Pixar movie, like not understanding totally what it was going to be about was like Up. Because since then, like Toy Story, we've got a new Toy Story, we got a new Monsters Inc. movie, we get like sequels of stuff.
We have, established characters and universes that we know at least some semblance of what we're getting.
And I think that they've done something else that was brand new. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
They did that, I forget what it's called, but I think that they did that Troll movie.
Oh,
we saw a preview for it at the Sonic movie.
The like the fantasy movie where like they
find the dad is like just his pants.
Yeah,
like it's his lower half, but it just looks like pants.
You're right, they did do that, and that came out this year too. And Janet and I watched that, and that was also like a middle of the road movie. I would say that was better than Soul, but it was very like meh.
Sure.
But with that movie, I feel like that movie I understood what it was going to be about before I watched it. You know, like I get like I get the tone, like the
you watch the trailer and you're like, I essentially just watched this film,
right?
Just fill in the like general movie tropes.
Yeah, right. But with Soul, it was like I don't really know what this is. Like he's a blob. He looks like Boo Berry. I don't know. Like I don't understand what's going on. And I feel like the last time I saw a Pixar movie like that was Up. Now, Up,
which was fantastic.
One of the best movies of all time, even. Yeah. I mean, the first 5 minutes of the movie is one of the best films of all time all by itself. Yeah. And that's before the movie even really starts.
They're like, hey, here's this character that you know nothing about. Now you are going to weep for him.
Right. In 5 minutes. So, like, I don't know. Going into Soul, I didn't have, like, huge expectations, but, like, I was expecting something like Up, and it didn't click. Like, it
wasn't
fine.
A waste of time, but it wasn't. There were certainly better things I could have done.
Absolutely. And I didn't really like, I don't know. I thought the best characters were those weird afterlife people.
Oh, yeah. The like modern art.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, we're too complex for you to comprehend, so we just appear as modern art.
Right. All of them are named Jerry except for one other one that's name is Terry. And I thought all of those characters were like the most interesting part about the movie.
They were my favorite characters for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Tina Fey's character, the other soul, like the baby soul or whatever, that character just completely like fell flat for me. I feel like this movie was, I think, designed to be marketed towards adults, but like the kid stuff they put in it was like too Nickelodeon almost.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't do it for me.
Again, it wasn't a waste of my time, but there were certainly things I could have done that probably would have been more impactful or entertaining. But I mean, I watched it right around New Year's, I think. So like, I wasn't really doing anything otherwise. That's pretty much it, other than what I will get into when we talk about Game of the Year.
Sure. Way better than Wonder Woman 1984, if anybody wants to make that comparison. So if you're going to pick one of the two movies that came out on Christmas Day or around the Christmas time on the streaming services, Soul would be the movie to go and watch, because Wonder Woman, not doing it. For me, I think the only thing I really have to talk about is a game that's not going to be on my list, because it came out in 2019 and I've only played an hour of it so far. I started it looks like the word AI. It's AI, but it's supposed to be pronounced like the Japanese word I, which is love.
Okay.
So it's the Somnium Files. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I've
never even heard of this.
It's a very it's a visual novel, first of all, but it's sort of regarded on the same level as the Danganronpa series. So it came out in 2019. It's a like mystery game. You're trying to solve the murder of someone you know. The difference is like you have this artificial eyeball that has an AI living inside of it named Iba.
Okay.
And you have to like dig through dreams, basically. Like you're able to like travel through dreams, and you solve the crimes apparently by reconstructing these dreams.
Interesting.
Do
you like it?
It's charming so far. That's the only thing, is the characters are likable. They're fucking idiots. All of them are. It's like radiate himbo energy is what it is.
Excellent.
Also, all of them are like, so they're all in like their 30s, and they're like so like, it feels like they're sexually repressed. Like they're constantly flirting with each other, but.
And you're like, you're in your 30s. What?
Right.
This is 20s behavior. What have you done?
It's really weird. I mean, it's very anime, but I don't know.
Sure.
I like it so far, but I've only been an hour into it, so I will talk more about that probably next week and the week after as I play through it. But so far, good. I know it's been recommended by a lot of people. If you like Persona, if you like Danganronpa, it's a game that apparently a lot of people recommend. So that's what I'm doing with my time until Persona 5 Strikers comes out.
Soon?
Yeah.
Not soon enough, but soon.
Sure. So
before we get into anything, assuming you're done.
I am.
I remembered that I have a announcement to make.
Announcement time.
Very quickly. It's more of a commitment. It's a commitment to. What was that? I heard like an SOS.
It's like the news, the
special news bulletin.
Exactly.
Thing. Yeah. I am committing right here, right now, with the start of the new year. New year, new me, as they say. I will not be late to the podcast. If I am late to the podcast per week, like every week that I am late to the podcast, I will donate an additional, on top of what I was going to donate, an additional $5 to Extra Life.
Wow.
So, like, if I was late every week, that could be a couple $100.
Yeah, I mean, let's say every week.
Yeah, it'd be like 250, I think.
Yeah, right. All right.
Granted, Extra Life is in November, so like it would be a little shy.
But, right. You were on time this week, so you're off to a good start.
Point being, I am trying to value other people's time more and put more realistic expectations for my own time on myself. And I figured, what better way than to put my money where my mouth is?
Sure.
And what better cause than for the kids? So
absolutely. So if you watch the podcast on Twitch, which is getting into this next topic, it's gonna be 5 minutes. It's gonna be on time now, apparently.
On time from now on, and if it's not, I owe money to the kids.
So at the start of the show, I gave a new URL to Twitch. And to be honest, I don't even know how much longer I'm going to be giving that URL to Twitch.
I hate the underscore.
I do too. There is a quick time. Okay, so here's the thing. You would think, and I for those of you that listen to this podcast, I swear to God, if you all go out and start just like getting QuickTime event domains and stuff, I'm gonna be upset.
Buy them all. Come on.
It's
before oh shit, we're live. Damn it.
QuickTime event isn't like it. There's not very many people that you would think it would be way more popular than it is.
Yeah, that's a common phrase associated with video games. It should be like, there should be multiple shows that use this name or some variation of it.
Sure. There's really not, though. And like so there's one person, and the people that are using it have been dead, or like they just don't use the account.
It's inactive, yeah.
So I'm in the weeds, I guess, going into the Twitch. I was like Googling them, and every 2 weeks or every month or whatever, looking to see if they still have it, because Twitch does go back through.
Truly are dead.
They do go through and recycle old accounts every couple of months or so. So
you have to.
I'm gonna keep an eye on that. But like no one's called the QuickTime Event podcast. You would have thought that like with all of the gaming podcasts out there, that would have been something that would have been picked up, and it's just really, it hasn't been. So we were lucky in some respect to get that name. And so what I'm doing, my New Year's resolution, if you will, is to put more effort into this brand. Twitch is like the place that I want to be. I just can't dedicate enough time to it to make it worthwhile. Twitch is a great platform if you're in college or if you're in your early 20s and are dedicating 4 to 5 hours a night streaming to build up a user base or to build up an audience.
Community. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I just can't in good conscience. And I talked about this last week when I didn't want to come into this room to play Cyberpunk. Yeah. I don't want to be away from my partner or my dog like every night for 4 hours a night. That's just not something that I can do in this time. And on top of it, like the couple of weeks and I know it's a couple of weeks and you have to be, dedicated on Twitch for weeks and weeks and weeks to be able to build up a base. I would have like, a few people stop in, but it's usually people I know. It's like my IRL friends or like people that I've met. It's never like just random people popping in. That would only happen in...
I was just going to say, I imagine it's such a just like mountain to climb.
Definitely.
With viewership and like not getting anywhere, like not really seeing progress.
Sure.
At least the way that you would hope to.
And on top of that, I was never going to be a person that played one game. If it would have been like Overwatch would have been that game, but like I want to play, if I'm streaming 4 days a week or whatever, I want to play the game that I want to be playing,
Yeah,
and
you don't want to play Overwatch for 4 days a week, 5 hours a stream.
Sure. I mean, I could dedicate, if I became a full-time streamer, I could dedicate 3 days a week to just playing Overwatch if I wanted to, but like I can't do that as someone that's trying to get started. And so it's hard enough to gain a user base or an audience on Twitch, let alone being a variety streamer and trying to get an audience on Twitch.
Yeah.
If you go and look at, the top streamers, they're all people that play 1 or 2 games or like a genre, like they are the FPS person or whatever. There are very few, and they're out there, but there are very few examples of people that are variety streamers that get big, or even get sizable enough to, have it be worthwhile.
To make it their career.
Sure. And so about 2 or 3 months ago, it was over the summer, maybe actually it's been a little longer than 2 or 3 months. It's been almost, 4 or 5 months now.
So that's half the year, my dude. You're in winter.
Yeah. We started putting up the VODs for the podcast on YouTube, and they've done relatively well on YouTube. They get, not an astronomical number of views, but also it's a long form piece of content on YouTube, which also doesn't typically do as well as shorter form content because people just don't have hours at a time to look at something. But we're getting way more views on YouTube than we ever have on Twitch. And it just seems like that's a place that is going to allow us to take this maybe a little bit further. And the way that I'm planning to do that is and it's also allowing me to get my personal interests in line too. Where I'm committing this year, this is the resolution part of this, to starting a short form video series on video games and nerd culture. So it's going to be, I'm saying probably 10 to 15 minutes kind of thing every couple of weeks on a topic that maybe we'll cover on the podcast more in depth, or I'll get your opinion on it. But like, it's going to be more, I don't want to say evergreen, but like a mixture of a bunch of different things.
Sure.
And so that's going to, hopefully help us grow by having this regular video come out. But then also, I want to learn video editing. It's something I've always been interested in since before YouTube. Like in middle school and high school, we would shoot these dumb backyard movies, and we would only ever be the ones watching them because we would just watch it on our own. But we made a ton of these dumb like shorts that we, looking back on it, should have put on YouTube in 2008 because maybe it would have went somewhere. And so video editing has always been something that I've been interested in. And so I have the technology. I have, a computer that can render 4K video. I have access to Premiere Pro because of this podcast. And why not do that this year? Because that'll allow me to work on something more sporadically. I don't have to set a crazy schedule where I'm broadcasting 4 or 5 days a week.
You can see your family.
I can see my family. And it'll allow me to put out something that I hope is polished and interesting, because I put a lot of work into this stream, and I think that that has definitely grown over time, where like my competence at Photoshop and using OBS and all of these things has really gotten to a place where I feel like I can take that next step now into video editing.
Yeah.
So that's my plan. I already have a couple videos lined up for ideas, and I'm in the process of writing the script for the first one. My goal is to shoot that in the next week or so. And then from there, I need to learn how to edit. So the first video I'm going to try to have out before the end of January. But that's sort of my thought there. Going back to QuickTimeEvent _ on Twitch, I don't know how much longer we're going to have this podcast on Twitch. It's definitely still going to be live. That part I'm confident in, is we're still going to have this be a live show. I just don't know if it's going to live here or if it's going to live on YouTube Live or YouTube Gaming or whatever it's called.
Whatever it is, yeah.
At some point, if it makes sense, if we start, having people subscribe, it might make more sense to broadcast this on YouTube. I just don't know what that looks like. So that's sort of my thought there. We're still going to do the Persona 4 Golden Let's Play series. That'll still be streamed to either here or on YouTube. And then once we complete that, I don't really know what's next as far as like actual playing game content. I still want to play games, and there might be an opportunity, like if we get a group of people together to play Among Us or whatever during a stream, that would be something that I could even record as that goes and then edit it for a more streamlined Let's Play. There's just a lot that we can do. I guess what I want to say is that I'm transitioning more to YouTube away from Twitch because it just suits my lifestyle better, I think.
Yeah.
And it's something new. It's something exciting. So look forward to that, I guess.
All right.
So let's get into the topic of the show because we are going to be here for quite a while, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yes, we are.
Can we talk about how fucking crazy this fucking year was for games?
This year was insane on every single possible level.
So I played a total of 50 games. Since a couple weeks ago, I said I've played 2 more games and completed both of them, actually, before we got here. So 50 games I played.
Now, that includes games that you have previously played, right?
It does. There aren't really that many of them, though. Really, just like Overwatch is on there. That might be it, honestly. Like, there's not that many. I mean, some of them are older, and some of them are games I played for a very short amount of time.
Sure.
But for the most part, all of these were games I played for the first time, really.
All right.
Out of that list of 50 games, I have 18 games that I think are in the 8 to... No, you know what? I'm going to say all of them are at least 9s. I have 18 games in here that are at least 9 or 10 out of 10 games on my personal opinion scale. How the hell am I supposed to take that list of 18 games and whittle it down to 10? I did it. I hated it, but I did it.
It's a tough thing to do.
So here's how this is going to go. First, before we do anything, let's talk about our methodology, because we typically have done different things in the past in terms of the games that...
continue to, I am sure.
Yeah, in terms of what games we're going to include in our list. So for me, and this is not standard for either of us, it's whatever we want to do personally.
Yes.
For me, this year, they are all games that are 2020 games on my list. They are all games that came out in the year 2020. Last year was a special year, really the only year I've ever done this, where I played a new series that suddenly became my favorite series. So I actually had 2 lists last year, if you remember that.
You had a Persona included list and a non-Persona included list.
Right. So I'm not doing that this year. They're all 2020 games. So this is a true, for my list is a true 2020 game of the year list. So that's easy for me, I guess. What is your list? What is your methodology?
My list is the same as normal for me, which is just any game that I played that was new to me in 2020. That said, historically, I have played more backlog than new games, and so my list was usually dominated by older titles. This year, it's the first time, I think, possibly ever, where more than half of my top 10 list is actually relevant and from the proper year.
Nice.
So I don't know if that's speaking to me giving up on some of the backlog games, or if that's speaking to just the sheer like level that some of these 2020 releases were on.
Because it's both. It's there. Yeah. Not only like, okay, it's two things. There are a ton of games that came out this year for every audience imaginable.
True.
And most of those games that came out were great games. Like, not there was both quantity and quality this year. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. We each have a top 10 list ranking from number 10 to our game of the year at number 1. We have also both given ourselves 2 or 3 honorable mentions that we'll give alongside the top 10 list. I'm guessing we both did 3 honorable mentions.
Yes. 3 honorable mentions, 5 just regular mentions, and then top 10. Before
we get to those, though, I want to very briefly go over what we painstakingly had to cut out. So don't list off all of the games you played this year and what you cut out.
That was the 5 mentions that I had.
Okay.
Mentioned.
Yeah. So just let's give off, I guess I have 5 as well. The games that we did not put on the list. And we'll do this very briefly so we're not going way over.
Yeah.
I'll go first, I guess. So number 1 on this list, and this is not like in any order for me for the mentions, it's just the games I cut, is Demon's Souls. Very clearly an amazing game. Like a 9 out of 10 game at least. It's not for me. I've decided that the Souls games, they're just not, I can't get into them. They're fun to play.
I really think you might like them more if you played with somebody.
I think so too. I definitely agree with that statement. I just don't know that I would, even if I play them with somebody else, I don't think that I would rank it higher.
Okay.
I think that like my enjoyment of the game or my analysis of the game comes from the game itself. And I would definitely have a better time with it, but I don't think that I would evaluate the game any differently. Just for me, for my play style, for all of that, it's just not my kind of game. And it has nothing to do with the difficulty. I'm fine at like it's hard, but it's doable if you put enough time and effort into it. It's just it doesn't have the hooks in me. And I can never get the hooks in. I get with every game I played, with the exception of Bloodborne. And I platinumed Bloodborne back in my very most hardcore of trophy hunting days because I felt like I needed to. But if I had started Bloodborne for the first time now, I'd never have platinumed it.
Sure.
But yeah, Demon's Souls, not on my list. Next up is Astro's Playroom, also not on my list. By far the best pack-in game ever made, for sure. It's a 2-hour game. Like if it was a full 10, 15-hour game even, I might think differently of it. It's not at the level of everything else that I have on my actual list. Amazing game though. Next up is Bugsnax. I'm sorry, Bugsnax. I couldn't do it.
Sad.
Bugsnax, you fought admirably. If you had come out last year, you would have been my game of the year, except for Persona. You probably would have been number 1, honestly. You probably would have beaten out Fire Emblem. That's how good Bugsnax was in my mind, but it's not good enough this year. Sorry, Bugsnax. Among Us, not on my list. Among Us, like one of the most important games ever, took over this year, still is doing very well. Player base has not really dropped off, not anywhere near as much as Fall Guys, but not on my list. Too many other things. Last up, Cyberpunk 2077. I do believe that this game is a 9 when it works and on the PC. It's a game that, on the PC, if it had only come out on the PC, if the other console versions had not come out, if they were canceled or pushed off or whatever, this game would have been nominated for Game of the Year almost everywhere, for sure. As long as you're playing on a PC that's running a 30 series card, you're probably going to be okay. Again, I just couldn't get into it because of personal issues, I guess. I do think I'm going to play it next year when the PlayStation 5 version comes out. I think I'm probably going to buy it again. And we'll see. I might have it on next year's list, depending on what next year looks like. But those are my 5 games that are not on my list. So Demon's Souls, Astro's Playroom, Bugsnax, Among Us, and Cyberpunk 2077.
All right. Then moving on to my list. Again, no particular order. We'll start with the one that made me feel like I was... My foot was in the door of a cult, and that was Moon Remix RPG.
I remember you playing that. Did you ever beat it?
I didn't. Something came out I think, and I put it down and just never went back. But like, what a weird game, in a good way? Question mark. Like I said, like as I got more stuff done in that game, I felt like I was joining some kind of secret society, and I don't think I've ever had that feeling playing any other game. So,
the Souls games are kind of like that.
Yeah, to an extent for sure. Next up was a game that came out a while ago, but I played it for the first time. I think it was after the pandemic started. Maybe it wasn't. Donut County. Very charming.
Oh, fuck.
Very fun.
That would have been there as well. Oh,
did you play that as well this year?
I did play that this year. Yeah, for the first time.
Oh, okay. So yeah, very charming, very fun. The humor was spot on. Only thing is, you're just a hole trying to eat things and get bigger. Like it wasn't the most captivating for gameplay for sure.
Yeah.
And the story was a little weird. It was funny, but it wasn't like, I don't know, award-winning writing.
No. Though some of those jokes in the appendix were pretty good.
Oh yeah, the Trashopedia or whatever, phenomenal. I want that in real life. Next up is actually one of the games from your list, Among Us. Same exact reasons. It's the other things came up. It was fun when I played it, but it was fun when I played it, and then I played it with friends, and then I realized that I was having way more fun playing it with friends, and then I realized that I just wasn't playing it at all.
Yeah, you have to play that game. Like it's such hit and miss. It's so hit and miss when you play with randos.
Yeah,
especially when you have the voice chat. I feel like is the best way to play that game.
That's what I've heard. I've yet to really do it like that. But anyways, next up is a game from 2020, and that is the new Paper Mario. Really fun game. I just wish that they would stop calling these games Paper Mario games.
It's just the style. Like there's what does Paper Mario mean now? It's just like it's.
I don't know. It used to be an RPG featuring Mario, and now it's not. And at this point, more than half the games are not. But like, it's kind of like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. I enjoyed that game as a game. As a Banjo-Kazooie game, I was not very happy with it. So, plus Nintendo really is shooting themselves in the foot by like putting all these restrictions on what they can do for like character customization. Not on like what the player can do, but like all of the Toads were the same. Like no Toad really stood out other than their color, whereas in past games you had like pirate Toads and nerdy Professor Toads and like all this other stuff, and it's like, why are you not letting your creative people do what they do, which is be creative?
That is kind of bizarre.
And then the last game, and I feel like this is a crime as a Zelda fan to put this on here, but it was the first time that I actually beat A Link to the Past. Great game for when it came out. Some things that were very aged, obviously, because this game came out so long ago. But I do understand and appreciate why so many people herald it as one of the best Zelda games, and that's because it was such a huge advancement in terms of video games, not just the Zelda franchise, for them when they played it the first time.
Sure.
But I grew up with the N64 titles, so like all that advancement happened already. So not as much nostalgia for me.
You just described why I can't go back and play any old games and enjoy them. Like I don't have like there are so many, especially Nintendo, but like everything that is old that I didn't play, I can't go back and play and enjoy.
Miss the train.
Because I'm a curmudgeon.
It's okay. All right. So our mentions are done.
Our mentions, they have been mentioned. They're it's in the past. Okay. So now we are into the real meat and potatoes of the show. We will do first honorable mentions. We'll go back and forth on these. And then we'll go back and forth on the top 10 list.
When are we putting... So we are also predicting each other's top 3.
When
are we doing that?
Yeah, so not until the end. So like what you wrote them down, right? Or you
we'll retroactively do it?
Yeah, so John and I have both tried to predict what each other's top 3 are. So there are our game of the year, our number 2s, and our number 3s.
There's a small caveat, which is, since my list has some older games intermixed throughout, your guesses, as long as they're my top 20, my top 3 2020 games.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Sure. So I guessed which games John put on his list as number 1, number 2, number 3 for 2020 games.
Yes.
So we will, once we go through all of these at the very end, we'll go back and see how we did and see if we were
see if
right.
If anybody gets a like weird kind of "I told you so."
Yeah. Okay. So for my first honorable mention, and these are in order. So this is my third honorable mention, really.
I will order mine then.
My first is The Pathless. That is a game that I played this week, actually. It was my last game of the year. The Pathless is very serene, and also not serene at the same time, because there are some moments that are very tense. But the premise of the game is you are a hunter that goes to this island to rid the island of this plague that's basically set upon it, because this other person went and corrupted the gods of the island and basically had all of the humans on the island murder each other. It's very horrific. But Excellent. You arrive on the island and it's very, very beautiful. The art style reminds me of almost like Breath of the Wild's art style. It's very like that same palette, almost like sort of what's like unsaturated colors, if that makes sense. But it's very stylistic, and essentially the hook of the game is you find this the god that, like the mother god, the ultimate god of the island, is this bird, this giant
the Zeus
eagle.
of the island.
And this giant eagle essentially creates a little eagle who I took it to be like she embodied the eagle, sort of. Mm-hmm. But the eagle wasn't necessarily the god. It was sort of like this weird kind of juggling thing. But this eagle became your companion, and it allowed you to fly, and it allowed you to move around the island kind of differently. And you have you're an archer, and there's these little like talismans, they're called, scattered throughout the island, and you shoot them and you move faster. There's a very, very cool movement system in this game. So like there's no fast travel. It's all an open world, but you move across the island by essentially shooting these talismans to make you speed up. And it's very fun. Like it's very addictive just to shoot the talismans. But there's a lot of puzzles. It's essentially a puzzle game where, it's not as like in depth as the shrines in Breath of the Wild, but there's some of the same ideas there. Like you have to like volley your arrows in certain ways, and like have them connect with like candles to catch on fire, to light other things on fire, and like to shoot things through. Like there's these mirrors that the arrows can bounce off of to hit certain targets and stuff. So there's a lot of really cool puzzles in there. I think that it tried to have like this really profound message, and it sort of falls a little flat. It sort of just turns into becoming like, this guy's bad, don't let bad guys do bad things, essentially. So the message at the end was like a little too on the nose. It wasn't as profound as something like Journey or like those kind of games, but it still was a really cool experience. Very short. I think you can beat it in 10 hours or so. Quick to platinum too if you want to do everything. So yeah, great game.
Alrighty. My first honorable mention goes to Dark Souls 3. What a way to cap off the Souls trilogy. I don't really know how to get into it too much. I mean, it's everything that you have come and like to expect from the Souls series, but well, maybe Demon Souls is better at this point just because it's newest. But like Dark Souls 3 took everything from Dark Souls 1 that you loved and then made it better. And I wasn't a huge fan of 2, but that's besides the point. And it also, I think, tied up all the loose ends if you read into the lore for like what the story and what the point is. just a very fun game. You can play it in so many different ways. For me, a highlight was being able to play it with some friends of mine over the power of the internet. Um, but it's just there's so much because of the Souls games. Like it is basically a cult on the internet.
It is,
And
yeah.
there's a good reason for it. Like if you find that you are able to enjoy this kind of game, it can suck you in and you can play. Like one of my friends has played the Souls games, but specifically Dark Souls 3 for like over 1,000 hours. And it's just one game. It's just you can play it in so many different ways. So it's absolutely fun. It's infuriating, but it's one of the most rewarding games to progress through.
Sure. I would say for Dark Souls, like if you've never played a Souls game before, like you're gonna I truly do think that these are games that anybody can play. I know that like the difficulty level is hard to get over, but eventually something clicks.
Yeah.
And it's the same for every Souls game. So it's not like you have to spend 10 hours in one game and then eventually you get it. Pick up any game. Pick up Demon Souls on PS5 if you just got a PS5. Pick up Dark Souls Remastered or Bloodborne or whatever. And if you put, like, give yourself at least 10 hours, I would say. Like 5 to 10 hours.
You got to be willing to invest.
Yeah.
But it will give the dividends that it pays back.
Right. You just need to be
more than
you need to be patient and you need to just keep at it. If like you can't do it one night, it's the exact game where you put it down, you take it up the next day and you do it the first time. Like just give yourself time because I'm weird, okay? I'm weird. I'm a gamer that like is starting to not enjoy gameplay as much. I don't know that I'm like a common thing. If you like playing games because they're fun to play, these are games that you can play and you're probably going to like. Just give yourself enough time to get into them.
Too true.
Number 2 for me, speaking of gameplay, is Hades. Hades, I cannot doubt the power of like Hades is such a fucking amazing game in every way. Its gameplay is immaculate. It's such a like it feels really great to play. There's like nothing. There's what 6 weapons, 5 weapons.
6.
6 weapons, and they all feel unique, and like the powers you pick up along the way make it like every experience different. It's so great. It's so great. The storyline is great. The characters are so likable. The voice acting is great. I can't get into it. Like I wanted to be done when I beat it the first time, and that's just not how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so, I did, and I beat it, and it's like, okay, I can't, I'm done. I'm good. I feel good about this. I fully understand why everybody else fucking loves it, and it got Game of the Year from a lot of big outlets this year. It just can't be on my top 10 list. I'm sure you will talk about that more later.
Oh, yeah. My next game up is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I forgot for a hot minute that this game came out this year.
Did it?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you're right. Yeah.
March, I think.
Okay. So
like right when the pandemic was really starting in the US.
That sounds right.
Right when time started to like freeze.
Sure.
And become an illusion. Really great game. It continued the story of Ori, who I think everybody who's experienced Ori loves Ori, because how can you not? The music was amazing, just like the first one. My biggest issue was that like there were frame rate issues on this kind of simpler game, like not super. It was beautiful, but like it didn't seem graphically that intensive. And it was on Xbox's own hardware, so I was like, this isn't a PC thing. Like this is I don't know why I'm having drop frames on a non-online game. Like this is infuriating. But besides that, the story was really, really nice. It wrapped everything up. It gave some closure I think, to the series. I don't know. Have they mentioned anything about continuing it? Because I don't really see how they would.
No.
But regardless, whenever I was playing it, it was so fun. It was beyond entertaining. It was exactly what the first game was, except better to me, minus the frame rate issues and stuff like that. But besides the technical issues, it was a step above where the original Ori game was.
Sure, and that's what I've gathered as well. It's just, and I think that a lot of those technical issues are now solved.
Probably, and if I went back and played it now, I'm sure that they would be gone. But like, another big thing for me is that they like. It's weird because there really wasn't very much. There wasn't like dialogue in the first one, right? Like it's weird because it doesn't scream character development, and yet I missed those characters a lot. Like I don't know how to describe it, but like these characters that I felt I had come to know just because I had played the first game and had gone on this adventure, it was so nice and charming to see them in some way, shape, or form again in the sequel.
I'm sure it's similar to something. I mean, like with some of these indie, I hesitate to call that an indie game, but with some of these smaller experiences, especially ones that are heavily playing off of older games, so Metroidvanias, really.
Yeah.
Like I would imagine you're going to feel a lot of the same thing with Hollow Knight. Like if some of the Hollow Knight characters pop back up, it's probably going to be similar. Like there's characters in Hollow Knight that you just meet, and like there's probably lore and backstory about those characters, but you don't really ever get to like know them, or like they never talk to you
unless
really.
you get super into it.
One of them just like mumbles and makes maps, and like that's his thing. It's like, okay, fine, yeah. That's what you do. But like when you see him in Silksong, it's like, oh, like that guy, yay,
he's back. I am very curious to see how many people will come back in that game, because like, well, different discussion for a different day.
Sure. My last honorable mention goes to Animal Crossing: New Horizons, a game that was I said Among Us was an important game of this year. I think that Animal Crossing might be the most important game of this year, especially for the role that it played very early in this whole pandemic mess. Again, I think this is something that's going to be on John's list, so we'll talk about it at length later on. But for me to not include it in my top 10 list really just speaks to the top 10 list, man. Like,
yeah,
I can't believe, like, Animal Crossing, I'm going to say it's a 10. Like, even on the Josh scale, it's a 10. It had everything. It had the gameplay loop, at least for the first 25 hours or so.
Well, yeah.
It had...
We talked about that at length on other podcasts, where, like, week 1 sung its praise. Week 2 kind of got a little annoyed, but still sung its praise. Week 3, we're getting a little sick of some of these things. Week 4, I think that was the egg event.
That was the egg event. It's like, fucking
get out of here.
Why can't I craft? And I don't think you still can do this, because Janet will complain about it. Why can you not fucking craft stacks of things? Why do I need to fucking hammer on this dumb work desk to make a chair, and then I show it to you, and then I have to do it 50 more times if I want 50 chairs, and every time I'm going to show it to the camera? Those stupid little things still exist. And that definitely does like bring it down, and is a reason why it's probably not on my top 10 list, to be honest, because had I only played it for the first 25 hours, it would have made it on there. I don't know. Yeah. But like, because of that stuff, because of, again, it's not so much even that for me. It's just everything on my top 10 list
is so good.
Yeah. And so Animal Crossing: New Horizons, I recognize like the amazing work that it did for humanity in 2020. And you know, that studio put a lot of love and care in it. And I think they really cemented Animal Crossing as a franchise, like maybe even the top franchise for Nintendo at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Mario will always be their bread and butter.
It brought it up from being the like kind of second class of Nintendo titles and franchises to like, all right, you're in the big boys club now.
Right.
Like you are getting our resources and our attention.
Yeah.
We are celebrating your anniversary.
Right. Yep. So that is my last honorable mention.
My last honorable mention, again, if I had played this game when it came out, would have been in my top 10. A absolutely charming little game called Bastion. That was, I think, my first experience with Supergiant games. It was so it I don't it's so hard to put into words some of these things, some of these feelings that you get from video games, but like it was the perfect length for me. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too short. I felt like I actually was accomplishing something as I played it. The story I really enjoyed. I think people really liked it too, story wise.
Mm-hmm.
The gameplay loop and just the mechanics for me were very rewarding. Probably because I was good at it. Like I there's something to say for winning.
It's not a particularly
But
hard game, but
no. But one of the things that really was the highlight for me was that whole interactive narrator thing. That was like even if other games do it, I don't know if anybody's done it to the level that this game did it, of making it just seem so natural, but also so like important, even if what the narrator was saying wasn't important. It really it helped immerse me so much more for whatever reason.
well, because it's like you're telling it sort of reminded me in a way of Yoshi's Story, where like you open up
Yeah.
the picture book and it's like one of those pop-up books, I think, in Yoshi's Story, and it's like
Yeah. It was a big old pop-up picture
right.
book or whatever.
Bastion, when I played it on the Vita, and it very much felt sort of similar to that, like the art style being isometric and like the way that it was kind of blocky. It reminded me of like opening
It
up
did
a
feel like you were
pop-up book.
playing a story. Yeah,
Almost.
now that you mention it,
And
I never
so-
really thought about it that way.
Right, and like that narrator almost felt like reading Rainbow, kind of like it was. It just gave you like all these good feelings, and like the tone and the timbre of the narrator's voice. That's such a great voice acting job.
Yeah.
For sure.
I do also really like how the story played out. Cuz like you went into it and like many games do, you wake up and you don't know what's happening and you're like, "All right, I've seen this a million times." But like the way that everything kind of played out, you really sympathize and empathize with some of these characters that honestly, a lot of them don't talk. Like, or if they do, it's just a couple little lines of text on the screen. Like you don't really find out that much about them. And again, I think that speaks so much to the narrator because you find out about these characters from the background narration that this grovelly voice is filling you in the details as you progress. And it's like this person over here has told me about 6 things total in this however many hour game. But I know so much more because of this background narrator. It was just very, very, I really liked it. It was such a good game. It probably would have been on my top 10 if another game from maybe the same studio wasn't on it.
So you played Transistor, right?
Yeah, and that
there
one couldn't pull me in.
Was there a narrator in Transistor like that?
Sort of, not to that level. It was the like sword thing.
Oh, so it was sort of like a character in the game, almost.
Yeah, that was with you the whole time.
I'm just thinking because
and, like he kind of got annoying.
Yeah, because Hades does have a narrator like that. It's not as as extensive as Bastion's narrator, but there is a narrator there. And one of my favorite things,
charming back and forth.
Exactly, my favorite thing about the narrator, because the boy in Bastion never talks, right? There's no dialogue from the boy.
No, I don't think he ever talked.
But Zagreus never shuts the fuck up. Like Zagreus is just talking constantly. And one of my favorite parts about Hades is Zagreus's just like flippant attitude towards the narrator.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's part of the reason why I like that game a lot. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and we'll get into that more in a little bit.
Okay, so there you have it. We have our honorable mentions. Can you guess what's going to be our top 10 lists? You've listened to this podcast all year, maybe. If you have, what do you think we got? Because here we go.
You realistically should be able to get like half of our lists because we have mentioned every game we've played throughout the year.
Yeah.
So you pool limited down to 35 to 45 games each. Numbers.
Let's do one of the what's that the Uno card reverse. Is that an Uno card? The one that makes you go the opposite direction?
That's a reverse.
I'm handing you the reverse card. You get to do your number 10 first.
All right, my number 10 is probably going to make you a little upset.
Oh, no.
It was a great game. It was so unique and charming, and I had not played very many, if any, games like this at all. There were just so many other games that were a bit more engaging, but this was the chillest game that I played this year, and that is Coffee Talk.
Yeah.
It had such a good ambiance. It was so the story was honestly the craziest thing is that the story wasn't anything crazy. The story was regular life, which I guess at the time I played it is what I was missing.
That's
so, like,
true.
Regular life, I was like, man, I wish I could go to a coffee shop. I don't even like coffee, but I want to go be a regular that sits down and like a barista is just like, oh, okay, I know what you want. Here, how's life? Like, I wanted that so badly just because of what this year has been.
Mm-hmm.
But to see it kind of like acted out in this almost the same but like slightly different than our universe, where it's the same issues but like portrayed in the scope of kind of fantasy. I always like seeing that. It's why I like Futurama so much, because in Futurama you see the issues of today but framed with robots and aliens and like stuff like that. Like, I don't know what it is about having that kind of separation where you can see the problems.
Yeah, I mean it's that idea of something being relatable. Like, it's all like the Lord of the Rings is awesome, right? But like, I'm never going to be in a situation where my decision is going to impact the fate of the world. I mean, knock on wood.
Probably. Hopefully.
I'm never going to be, Frodo trying to figure out whether or not I want to throw the ring into the mountain unless, Gollum bites my finger off. That's never going to be me. I like the Lord of the Rings a whole lot, but it's not relatable almost at all. But Futurama is all about regular, ordinary situations. And this game is all about regular, ordinary situations. The fantasy aspect of it is like the least interesting thing in the game.
Yeah. You know exactly what each of these like fantastical creatures would like, what their corresponding thing is to the real world. Like, if you have a relationship between these two people who are from different
races,
mythological races. Yeah, it's obvious what that is in the real world. It's again, races, but in a different sense. So it was just so charming. There were just so many good games this year.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's on your list. It's number 10.
Yeah. I assume it's somewhere on your list too, so we can talk about it a little bit more whenever we get there.
Yeah. My number 10 game is a game that I went and I looked just to see the other day. I actually played a little round of it, but I wanted to see how much time I had sunk into it because I really had lost all sense of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that game is Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. Is number 10 on my list.
All right.
I think I put in 70 hours in a Fall Guys.
Jesus.
Which is insane when you think about it, because like that game, it never felt like it took up that much of my life. Like it was, but then I think back about it and like I was streaming that game like 2 days a week. It was a huge amount of my time. And then I played it during Extra Life and here and there when the new seasons come out. It is one. I mean, this year it's the best multiplayer experience that I had by far. Like Overwatch, I love Overwatch, and I had some GGs in Overwatch, but I never felt like what I was feeling in Fall Guys for Overwatch at this point.
Definitely.
So it's cute, it's highly accessible. Like one of the best things about it is it's so replayable because it's almost so random. Like, you can be good at the game, but being good at the game doesn't guarantee that you get to the last round by any means.
No. There were games that you and I played where we'd be like, we would get into, well, let me phrase it like this. There would be games where one of us would get knocked out in the first round just by sheer chance.
Yeah.
We would just get completely wrecked by some unforeseen thing.
All right, like
we are both good at games.
There's physics in the game that they're never going to explain for good reason. Like, there's just it's because the Fall Guy is an enigma. Who knows what's inside a Fall Guy, and who knows where the weight displacement is? And that weight displacement really fucks up, just jumping. And if you jump and you bump into anything, you could be fine, or you might roll around on the ground for 20 minutes. No one knows.
Your ankles might get clipped. Who knows?
Sometimes you might be, if your ankles get clipped, sometimes you can jump out of it. Sometimes you just can't. It doesn't let you, and that's just how the game works. And it's fine. You accept it because it's Fall Guys. But yeah, it's such an amazing idea where it's a flip on this battle royale thing. Like, okay, let's take Fortnite, let's take PUBG, but let's make it really cute, and we'll make it about platforming. And me being somebody that's not really particularly attached to platforming, 3D platforming I get a lot more than 2D platforming, but like it having it be competitive adds a lot to it, and like it never feels like you're it's so intuitive too. Like, it's never something where you're trying to figure out how to do something.
No.
There's that one round where you have to push the blocks and like climb up the blocks, and it uses the climbing mechanic almost exclusively.
Yeah, which I didn't know existed for a little while.
Yeah, that's not so much like I don't know how to do it. It's just like I can't do it because the physics in this game are so stupid. But it was done on purpose. So like, I don't know. It's a pristine multiplayer experience. The other thing it had going for it was the PlayStation Plus aspect of it. I know a lot of the streamers or whatever played it on, I think a lot of people played it on Steam, but it was so popular because PlayStation gave it away for free.
Yeah. Everybody
got to play it again at a time when we needed that. Like, again, it came at the perfect time, like late summer. Like, we had been, if I had my fill of Animal Crossing after a month.
We were sick of Animal Crossing for sure.
People who had not gotten sick of Animal Crossing yet, now they finally have something else to do. Like, it's something new. It's something exciting that, we can all get behind. It'll become part of the zeitgeist. It'll become popular on Twitter, and there will be fan art that is very questionable and all this stuff. It's such a great experience. So that's why I had that. I wanted to put it on my list. I had it above Among Us, even though it seems like Among Us is the more critically well received game. I think that this game just had so much more going for it, in a lot of ways. So number 10.
All right, number 9. I again am just trying to make you as mad as I possibly can. I think
I can't be mad. That's on the list.
That's fair. I think this game would have been much higher had we been farther along in it. But so far, I don't know enough about it.
You're putting it on your list?
I'm putting it on my list. Okay. I look forward to playing it. Persona 4 Golden.
Okay, let me say something.
Sure.
I put Persona 5 on my 2018 list because I played it like January 15th or something. Mm-hmm. So it was on my 2019 list. I think I put it in my honorable mentions, actually, for 2018. And then it ended up being my game of the year in 2019. So let's see what happens here.
Yeah, well, I think that there is reasonable... This is one game that I would consider putting on a list multiple years in a row, just because it is such a long game. But I am... Like, the first play session that we had, it was interesting, but it did feel very dated. And I wasn't sure how much I was really going to like the game. But I really like the dynamics between the characters, especially. And, like, I really want to know what's ultimately happening at this point. I want to see where this story is going to go, because it could be really, really great. And I get the feeling that it probably is really, really great, because, I mean, so many people herald this game as being amazing. But, I mean, the soundtrack is phenomenal. I love it.
Shoji Meguro is such a fucking
Not sure
master.
If I like it. I don't know if I like it more than Persona 5 soundtrack or not, but, like, if it's even to the point where I'm considering that, Persona 5 was full of absolute bops. Like, the music itself is just brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And I do really like the like design scheme of this game too. Like Persona 5, it felt very cool. Like it felt lots of reds and blacks and whites. Like I don't know what the right phrase or terminology for that kind of
it's
color
very
scheme
like
is.
like punk, like how I imagine.
Yeah.
It's very it's very Hot Topic without the emo aspect of
Yeah.
it.
Whereas this game is like almost the exact opposite, and it's like, hey, we're gonna be groovy Scooby-Doo 80s cool, like maybe 70s even, like with lots of browns and oranges and greens and yellows. And it's like it makes me think of that 70s show, which I never really got into that like aesthetic, but it really works for this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's been so fun so far. Even just watching it, like not necessarily being the one in control, but I don't really feel like you need to be in control for this kind of game because it's not that it's not skill based, but like you're making decisions. You're not really doing like button timed things.
Sure.
It's strategy more than anything. And like you're making decisions about what kind of equipment you have and what kind of play style you want to do. But like you never have to platform, or you never have to be the one like pressing the button at the right time, or rolling out of the way, or dodging, or doing something like Dark Souls. So like this is one of those games that I do feel you can get the full experience even if you just are watching it.
Right. I agree with that. Yeah, Persona 4, like as time goes on, Persona 5 is still probably my favorite game of all time, but I think I'm most fond for Persona 4 in like some weird backwards mental gymnastics that I do in my head. Like
Sure.
both of those games are so special to me. I love Persona 3 too, and I hope, I don't know, maybe after we finish Persona 4 we can go back and do Persona 3 too, but like or maybe there will be a remake or something. But
Yeah.
with Persona 3, I love those characters just as much as I love the Persona 5 and the Persona 4 cast. And the story is great in Persona 3 too, but with Persona 4, there's just something about the dynamic between the group that just makes that game so special, because it takes me back to high school. Like yeah. I had a 4 or 5 person friend group in high school that I am no longer in contact with, but like in high school, like that was it. Like I wasn't the person that was the social butterfly and friends with everybody. I had this small, tight knit group of friends that, very much the group in Persona 4 reminds me of. And
yeah, same here.
It takes me right back there. And, we have 3 of those party members, I guess 4 with Teddy. But we still have 3 more people to pick up along the way. And I'm excited for you to experience the rest of this game because, the group dynamic is just so wonderful. It's so great.
It did also feel very, again, going back to the relatable thing. It felt very relatable and continues to feel relatable because like I grew up near a city, but like in a suburb, and yeah, the thing to do was go to a store.
Right. Yeah,
like,
we would go to
or
Walmart.
Go to a food court. Like you'd be like, oh hey, you guys this weekend, how about we go to the mall like 20 minutes away so we can go to the food court? And it's like, this is a little too on the nose.
It really is. Like you make fun of Juness in the moment. Like, oh man, they're going, Nanako wants to go to Juness for her vacation. What's wrong with her? But then it's like, okay, in high school on a Friday night, we would be like doing whatever, like by the bonfire or whatever. And at fucking 10:30 p.m., we're like, hey, you want to go to Walmart? Let's go to Walmart. That's open 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then we would go to Walmart. It's the exact same thing. It's so relatable. I hope it comes out. I hope it gets on the. I hope it gets everywhere. I at least hope that it gets to PlayStation so that more people can play it. Because having it on Steam is great, but like the PC player population is still very low. Again, anybody should be able to play it because it's not a graphically intensive game. It's a almost 10-year-old game now with Golden, so it's like your computer should be able to run it no matter what kind of computer you have. But it's, again, one of those games that I don't necessarily know that I would want to play on a PC because it's a 100-hour RPG. So I am curious to see if it's on your next year list too, because I feel like we'll finish it probably in the summer sometime, most likely.
It's the thing and that's why it was so tough for me to figure out where to put it this year, because it's been great so far. And like, yeah, I guess there is a risk that I could end up not enjoying it, but it's far more likely that as we continue, I'm going to enjoy it more.
Yeah.
So I figured I'll put it low on the list this year, still in the top 10. And then if I really, really like it by the end of the playthrough, I'll at least be able to consider putting it on the list again next year, maybe in a higher spot.
Sure. My number 9 is your number 10, Coffee Talk.
Oh, okay. I don't feel so bad now.
Yeah. It's like John said, it's a great, I mean, it's a short experience. It's 3 hours maybe.
Yeah.
But
if you go back and get the completion, it's like maybe 4.
Sure. It's just such a wonderful, mundane experience. I think you nailed it. Like, I played it, I think it came out in February of this year, maybe early or late January. But it's a game that I played in over the summer after, 4 or 5 months of lockdown, and just being able to go to a coffee shop. I haven't, even like Starbucks, I haven't had Starbucks in almost a year now. Like, I haven't been anywhere like that. And I don't have a particular affinity for a coffee shop. Like, I never had that experience where I would go to a coffee shop regularly to do work or something. I did, in college, go to a coffee shop that was up in a little bit north of campus, up in Clintonville. There was a Caribou Coffee up there for some reason. And Caribou has since closed. I don't know if they've closed entirely or if they just moved out of Ohio, but they are no longer there. But I would go to that Caribou Coffee maybe like once or twice a month to do some work. And it was like the only time that I would ever do that is to go to that one coffee shop. And there's just something about the environment of a coffee shop. And this game nails it with the lo-fi music. The soundtrack is amazing. It's it feels
even the like pixel art.
Yeah.
Which is weird because, like, obviously in real life, you would go to a coffee shop and it would not be pixel art.
Right.
But something about the pixel art in this game just felt right for the vibe of a coffee shop.
Absolutely. Like, if you're one of the people that, if you know what lo-fi music is, and even if you don't know what lo-fi music is, you probably know that meme at this point of, like, that girl that's studying with the headphones on.
And it's raining in the background.
And it's raining in the background. That's the entire aesthetic of this game. And the soundtrack is amazing. It's really great. The lo-fi soundtrack it's an original soundtrack by the guy. I think it was developed by a really small studio, if not just 1 or 2 people. And one of those 2 people did the entire soundtrack too. So
I find it so amazing how many of these like indie titles that become just absolutely beloved, like the person behind it or one of the main people behind it is so musically involved. Like, that just seems to be such a common theme on these indie studios.
I mean, I feel like that's a thing that has always been around in games. Because when you go back, way back to the NES and the SNES, those development teams weren't that big. Like, we're not even like Nintendo's games. They were not the 300 person development teams that we have now for AAA games. And even with going back to Persona, like, Shoji Meguro has been there the entire time. If there's a through line, I played Persona 1 this year. I didn't finish it, but I played that this year. Meguro's music in Persona 1, even on the PS1, are bops. They're so great. And I feel like it's just like, I don't know if it's just like innate talent. Like, game devs are by trade artists, really. Yeah. And so they have this technical ability. I don't know. But yeah, Coffee Talk, amazing experience. Very ambient, very unique. So, love it.
So good.
So good.
My number 8?
Yep.
Yeah. My number 8 was one of your honorable mentions, and I think it's just because I didn't get tired of the gameplay loop quite as quick as you did, and that is Animal Crossing. Vastly important to the hellscape that was 2020. There was something there's something magical about having a routine restored to your life, and like being able to having something that gives you a reason to know what the week is. And for a lot of people, that thing was work, and for many of those people, that work was no longer a thing for at least a couple months there. And so Animal Crossing gave you something to do every day that was at least a little bit different, but also still the same. It felt like a job, but a job that you wanted to do that was, I don't know, more charming and more instantly rewarding. Like, you obviously can't just go to work and be like, okay, here's these things I found. Give me my paycheck now. Whereas in Animal Crossing, you can be like, hey, I picked up these shells. Give me this money so that I can buy this thing right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but if everybody just saw me making faces, it's because I tore the tab off of my seltzer water.
Oh, you fool. It's in there, isn't it?
Well, the tab didn't come off, but the little ring thing fell in.
The more dangerous thing
absolutely
that you could swallow and like cut up your insides with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So that's upsetting. Sorry.
No, you're good. What can I say though? Animal Crossing, it's more Animal Crossing if you like Animal Crossing. They have made, I think, pretty drastic improvements, and they've done a good job of supporting it. Like, I know that they did a lot of holiday stuff that I didn't personally experience, but some people I know did, and they said that it was very fun, very charming. It kept them engaged, brought them back. I just burned myself out a little bit.
Sure.
But I had probably more time than I should have in that game logged on my Nintendo Switch, and that's mostly because there would be days where I would be working and I would just turn it on just to have the background music. Because again, that soundtrack is just so calming. And like every hour it changes. So if you have it on, all of a sudden the music changes, you're like, oh, something's different now.
Next hour. So, it's now it's 4:00 now.
So very fun game. Got a little repetitive, a little too quickly. Probably my own fault for overplaying it, but still, vastly important for 2020.
Absolutely.
And yes, there were some faults of the game itself that made it get old quickly.
And that's the thing is, I don't want to it's Game of the Year discussion. I don't want to talk about the negative aspects of Animal Crossing because we did that at length. It's just like there were some design aspects that I feel like they implemented almost like stubbornly. Mm-hmm. Like, we know that players could progress a lot faster if they got the shop to level 3 or whatever, but you can't do that for at least 3 in-game months. So that's too bad for you. Or even like the stupid, just like, let me craft fucking fish bait more than one at a time, please.
That was my big thing. If you could stack craft things.
So yeah, there's some stuff that is just...
It probably would have bumped up a spot or two on this list.
Probably. I mean, that it would have been on my top 10 list most likely if some of those dumb little things just were remedied. But at the end of the day, I don't think that those are oversights. I really just feel like that's what they want the game to be. They want it to be this repetitive thing that you do.
Yeah.
Because it's addictive, and it's just like that's just the way they do it.
Pretty much, yeah. It sounds about right.
My number 8 is the swan song of the PlayStation 4. One, Ghost of Tsushima by Sucker Punch Productions. Absolutely beautiful game. It's such a like breath of fresh air when it comes to its art direction. Because I really feel like what they did is, I mean, they had the last 3 games they put out were all Infamous games. Technically 4 games, really. 3.5, whatever. But so they've had like this open world sort of genre sort of under their belt now. And now when they got to this game, it's weird that it's not weird, but it's unique that they chose to do a Japanese game about Japanese people. and being a Western studio. That's something that hasn't really happened before. Like, all of the Japanese games that are out there are by Japanese developers, and there was a lot of talk about a lot of stuff in this area that a lot of it was just overblown and just flat out wrong. But at the end of the day, the game was received amazingly in Japan, and they nailed Japan. They nailed Tsushima as a place, and they were able to do it in a way that made it artistically interesting. It wasn't just Assassin's Creed, but in Japan. It wasn't just like an open world game set in Japan. It was a world that felt like it had an art direction. It felt like Hokusai's Wave. It felt like Japanese art in a way that, like, a lot of it was done for cinematic purposes, and they had an entire gameplay mode, Kurosawa mode, that allowed you to play the game in black and white like old samurai films. And you can tell how much influence, like, they did so much research, and there was so much put into this game's direction when it came to implementing a lot of that old stuff. But like the way that the leaves fell from the trees, the way that you were crunching through snow, like the sound your feet made in the snow, the way that the snow sat on trees, and like the way that the shrines were developed, and there were like the weather effects, and you would hear the thunderstorms start to like roll in from across the island. It was such an amazing place. Gameplay wise, it does follow some of that Assassin's Creed sort of gameplay, the old Assassin's Creed games that I love, honestly, not so much the new ones, which was a huge appeal for me. But it takes a lot of those ideas from Assassin's Creed games. It takes a lot of ideas from other open world games, and it combines it all together into a package that feels complete. My big issue with Assassin's Creed games recently is just how big the world is. Tsushima as an island is definitely big, and there's a lot to do on it, but it at no point ever felt overwhelming. The cast of characters were great. The story was interesting, and it dealt with some pretty heavy themes, and nothing was super, aside from the art style, I guess, like nothing was like a true superlative, I guess. Like, you look at the story, and it was a totally fine story, but it wasn't as good as some other game story. Like, it didn't feel like a 10 out of 10 story. The gameplay felt good playing it. Like, it was fun to play, but it doesn't feel like 10 out of 10 gameplay necessarily. But the sum of all the parts was, in my mind, probably a 10 out of 10 experience. A lot of work went into that game, and you can see just how much passion there is for the subject matter and for the game itself. Like, Sucker Punch is a studio that I've always liked, but they've always sort of been on the second tier of Sony studios. And I feel like the PlayStation 4 generation was really a lot of those second tier studios becoming top tier studios. For the longest time, it was Naughty Dog, maybe Sony Santa Monica, and the rest of them. Now, this generation, Guerrilla has risen to the occasion. I think Sucker Punch has now risen to the occasion. Santa Monica has definitely taken that next step, if they hadn't already. Where you have at least 4 Sony studios that are the pinnacle of what AAA game development should be. And Ghost of Tsushima is what got Sucker Punch there. So, well done. Well done, Sucker Punch. Thank you for Ghost of Tsushima.
Good job.
I kind of want to play it on PS5 again, because some of those loading screens were fucking painful. And apparently there's a 60 frames per second mode, which is going to be hella nice for those of you playing it for the first time on PS5. So.
All right. Moving on to number 7 for me. Here is the first, well, yeah, I guess technically first, because Persona 4 Golden came out this year for PC. Here's the first old game. And it was your game of the year from like 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I finally played Horizon Zero Dawn. It was a lot of fun. I didn't know how I would feel about, like, I don't know what the right word is, but like being a tribal person, but fighting dinosaur machine-esque things. I didn't know how that whole thing would kind of like sit with me, because it just, I wasn't sure how they were going to explain this all away. Because like,
it's so ridiculous.
If you sit down and you don't play it and somebody just pitches you this idea, you're just like, so let me get this straight. You're shooting things with bows and arrow, and you're like some kind of native person, but you're fighting dinosaur robots.
Cool.
Are you in 3rd grade?
Man.
Did you just pick all your favorite things and put them in a blender and this is what you got? Like, how on earth could you make this a functional story and also make any kind of semblance of sense? But they did it. They did a really good job. They explained everything, I think. There weren't loose ends. There were cliffhangers, sure, but everything, like how the world got to be where it was, were perfectly explained in a way that honestly was a little scary, because it felt maybe like we were getting close to certain events.
Still does.
That led to how that game started.
Yeah.
Or what kicked off the events of that game that led to where you started as the player.
Right.
It was obviously graphically very beautiful. It was very pretty. I liked how you could pretty much choose your play style. Like, obviously at first everybody's just doing the bow and arrow and just shooting things, but as you get more weapons and progress, like, I feel like a lot of games fall into the pitfall where they give you all these options, but really you're just going to stick with like one main weapon and maybe a backup side thing. But this one, you were like, oh no, there's that enemy. I know exactly what I should do to like prepare myself for this. Like, I had never played a game as thoughtfully about what I was going to do when I engaged in combat as I did with this game.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think speaks to how well they thought out how the combat and gameplay would work.
Yeah, there's just so many like little things like that where, okay, we pitch you this idea where you are essentially a prehistoric human.
Yeah.
Who has to fight giant creatures, which prehistoric humans did. But they're fucking machines, okay? They're like these raging machines.
They're not your walnut-sized brain T-Rex. No. They have microchips and processors in them.
Right.
They are smart.
Just by virtue of that situation, you can't take a knife to a gunfight. You can't take a bow and arrow to a cyborg fucking Terminator fight or whatever. It requires you to put a lot of thought in, and like the whole point of the game was, all of these things have weaknesses, and your arsenal is built up so that you can lay traps down, and you have to like force the enemy to fight on your terms, which makes it such an engaging combat experience.
It was so good though.
Yeah.
Like, I think that one of the most impressive things to me was at the very start of the game, the simplest thing, like the Watchers, where they were basically just watchdogs. Those were scary to see and find, and you were like, oh, I'm avoiding that. And like later on, once you learned how to deal with them, you were like, oh, this is fine. I'll just go take those out real quick. It's gonna be easy. But like, they really did a great job of like scaling the learning curve of the game so that the first time you encountered something, you were like, nah, I'm taking another route. I'm not dealing with this. And then eventually you get to the point where you have to deal with it, and you might not deal with it the best way, and you barely get out. You use a lot of resources that you didn't need to, and then you learn as you play. And it really did feel like you were learning, like the character was learning obviously all these weaknesses and how to get better, but you as the player were learning too. And there's not many games that'll do that where like you actually have to strategize. It's usually just, oh, you're farther along in the game, here, you unlock this weapon that makes this a lot easier. Like it's the weapon you had at the start, but like with A rank stats or whatever. Like now you just don't have to worry about it because you're just overpowered. But right. That's not how this game worked, which I thought was really, really well done.
Yeah, for sure. And again, Guerrilla's one of those studios that, is now in a very different place than it was at the start of the generation when they were chained to Killzone.
let people do what they want to do. Case in point.
My number 7 is my favorite indie game of the year, which is Spiritfarer. A game that really came out of nowhere. I was not tracking Spiritfarer. I don't really know that anybody was tracking Spiritfarer until a random Nintendo Direct, I think, where it happened to be. I think that it was one of the... I don't remember this for sure, but I'm pretty sure it was the B-roll in a montage. A classic Nintendo Direct montage. I think.
Very likely.
Just an afterthought, essentially. And it looked okay in the montage. And then I saw someone playing it on Twitch one day when it came out. And my interest was piqued. Because of the style of the game, it's very almost Ghibli-esque. It's definitely not the Ghibli art style, but there's something about it's probably just Spirited Away, but there's something about anthropomorphic animals, I guess.
Yeah.
Like humanoid animals. And the situation was interesting. It was interesting enough for me to pick it up at a time where I was looking for a shorter indie experience. It's not really a short indie experience. It's
I was going to say shorter?
Yeah, it's like 40 hours long, I think. But then when you get into the game, you realize it has this storyline that is very interesting and is very inspirational in a lot of ways. But there's also this honestly, the most addictive gameplay loop of any game I played this year. The gameplay loop is so amazing.
Fun.
Like it epitomizes that idea of, well, I'll just do one more day. I'll do one more task. I'll do one more quest. I'll do one more whatever it is. I just want to sit
Stardew Valley
here.
Syndrome.
It's 100% Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
It's so fun. And that really doesn't ever wear off. I mean, I got to the end where like I had one person left on my boat that I needed to shepherd away. And at that point, like it got a little bit old, but it wasn't necessarily old and I was bored doing the tasks. It was old in that like I only had one person left, so I didn't have enough tasks to do essentially.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like waiting around at the very end of the game, which was a pacing problem, but not enough of a pacing problem for me to dock at any points essentially.
Could you have played it differently and avoided that, or not really?
Not really.
Like if you play the most efficient way, you're going to end up with that problem probably.
Yeah, because you need, so there's a ton of resources you have to manage. And one of the resources you get from shepherding people to their destination essentially.
Yeah.
And in order to progress the story, you need that resource. So like you have to get people off the boat. It's not like you can have everybody on the boat at the same time. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Okay. I gotcha.
And so, yeah, I think that, I mean, they're probably, cause I was also aiming to platinum the game. There was probably, a way to avoid some of that, but I still think that at the end of the game, it's going to be sort of like that for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really inspirational story, and you find out a lot about. It's one of those things where you're like, at the beginning you think it's about one thing, but at the end it's totally not. Like you're learning about these other characters, but it's really about you. It doesn't really feel about you until like there's these little moments throughout. It doesn't feel like your journey really. It feels like these other characters' journeys, but then at the end of the game, it all comes together, and it's really powerful.
Nice.
Death is a very important theme of the game. It's all about death and how to deal with death. And, as a lot of these indie games are that have these kind of stories, it's really, really emotional. So, I highly, highly recommend it to anybody because it's a simple game, but it can be really complex in its systems, and, it's very, very touching.
All right.
Get your tissues.
Will do. My number 6 is also an older game. Not that old. I don't think any of the games that were quote unquote older were more than like 3 years, maybe 4 at most. Well, there's one, but we'll get to that later. Anyways, it is a game that scared the shit out of me when I started, and it was still kind of scary as I played it, but it was such a cool experience that I couldn't put it down, and that is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. All the high praise that it got from people when it was like nominated for awards the year it released, 100% well deserved. The extent that they went on research and like to the best of their abilities and to the best of technology's abilities show you what it's like to have a mental illness, like it was psychosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to be able to, and that's just an amazing thing in general. But like you can, this is the closest you would be able to get to putting somebody who doesn't have some kind of mental illness into the shoes of somebody who does, and maybe have them understand it at a deeper level. Like it's it's really remarkable that you can do this with games. And like there's really no other medium I can think of where you'd be able to do it to this extent. Like even if you have a movie where you have somebody who has psychosis, you're passively experiencing it. Whereas in a video game, you are actively experiencing it. You are controlling it, and especially with the 3D audio, it truly is in your head. And the story was really, really well done. It was I mean it was obviously an older story because you're in like I guess mythological times? Question mark.
Yeah, it's Norse mythology, so I'd say like probably
It's
around the
it's always so weird in mythology because like the characters are in mythology, but then they talk about even
sure.
older things in mythology, and it's like where does this fall in history?
Yeah, I
If
would
I
put
had to
it.
place
I would put it like around 800, maybe like
sure,
the early 1000s.
but like and I think they they got in just in time on the Norse mythology boat because like it feels like a lot of things are going there now,
Yeah,
and if the game had come out now, you'd almost feel like it was like I don't
copying
know,
it or something.
it's pandering to what's popular at this point, but
Sure.
like it got in at just the right time. So like it was a fresh new thing. There wasn't too much out there, at least in like pop culture, about Norse mythology at that point. Um, so like a lot of the myths and stuff that you were learning about weren't the myths that had been hammered into your head from all these, I don't know, major video game franchises and movies. Like it wasn't the Greek mythology where you had the God of War series, you had like I don't know, I
Disney's
feel like
Hercules.
yeah, what is it, Troy?
Yeah,
That's like kind of in there. Like it wasn't oversaturated,
sure.
but more importantly, going back to the just like the level of fear that they instilled in you as a player, even though you knew damn well that this was a game. Like the concept that they introduced early on of saying, "Hey, this rot on your arm is basically a progress meter, and if it goes all the way up, it's game over permanently." Like, regardless of how that plays out, just that idea in your head is essentially a form of psychosis. Like, it's paranoia. It's just this nagging fear in the back of your head that you can't make go away.
Mm-hmm.
And like just the way that they explained and exposed the player to all this stimuli was absolutely brilliant. And as somebody who is just the world's biggest baby when it comes to scary games, I really had to convince myself to keep going after just basically the very introductory like 10-minute thing where you're on the boat like going to wherever you're going. Well worth it. If you get scared of these kinds of games, really try to overcome it. Like it is beyond worth exposing yourself and making yourself putting yourself in an uncomfortable position just because of what you will learn from this.
Yeah, it's psychological horror at its finest. So I also don't like scary stuff. I don't like horror movies, mainly because I don't like jump scares. I don't like the idea of something jumping out and going, ha ha, I'm here now. And now I have my heart fluttering and that kind of thing. But something about psychological horror is different. This is like the most Lovecraftian game you could ever play. This is the Call of Cthulhu. This is like such great horror that it makes you feel uneasy and it makes you really like want to consider playing it, but in like the best possible way. Again, I don't like scary games, but this kind of game is different. It's not like, oh, I'm going to turn my camera around and something's going to jump out at me. That's not the fear. The fear comes from the unknown, and the fear comes from the voices in your head. And it's such a unique experience.
The only time that they relied on like a quote unquote horror trope was for one small section where like you had to be in the light or else something would get you.
Yeah.
And that was for a very small section of this game. That was not the like general feeling of the game. There was like a specific reason why you were having to do that. And it wasn't just for the sake of scaring the player. It was like it was part of Senua's psychosis, part of what was going on in her head.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit because we still have quite a ways to go.
Sure.
Number 6 for me is Spider-Man Miles Morales, a perfect kickoff game for the PlayStation 5. Yet another, they nail this idea of like their version of Spider-Man, Insomniac's version of the Spider-Man universe is like, it nails like your ideal Spider-Man. Like it very much feels like the Peter Parker that we all know. And now the Miles Morales that we kind of know from a little bit of his media.
Getting to know.
But it still feels so fresh and unique. And it is because both of those characters are existing in the same universe. And that's not something that I don't think has really happened. At least not in a way where Peter Parker hasn't died yet. So with both of those characters running around, it's interesting. And it's like Miles Morales, the game was really cool because it took the exact same map that Marvel Spider-Man had, but streamlined a lot of it in a way that really cut down on some of the bloat that was in Marvel Spider-Man, which was a game I really enjoyed. But there were too many like crimes you had to go solve and too many side stories and too many of these little mini games you had to do. This really feel like it took all of that and condensed it down in a way that took all the bloat out, which was great. The story was great. The few of the characters that you met were impactful, and it's cool to see the world develop. Like you leave Marvel Spider-Man, there's a lot that happened in that game in terms of like the state of New York and some of the characters that exist in it. And this game takes that a step further, and you get to see like what's happening to the city, what's happening to Miles, and it's more Spider-Man. It doesn't do anything like that different from a gameplay perspective. Miles definitely plays a lot different than Peter does. There are some abilities that are different. Still feels like the same game.
Doesn't he have like electric
something? Yeah, he has. It's called Venom. He has like an electric pulse he can like beat people with, and then he can also turn invisible. So there's like more stealth involved than in the other game, but it still feels like the same game. So I'm really excited to see where Insomniac goes with it, because it's exciting. They could do a lot of different things, and all of them I'm sure are going to be great.
Fingers crossed. Alrighty, into the top 5. Real quick break. Were any of your predictions for my top 3 actually in my 10 through 6 spots?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to share or no? None of my predictions for you have been listed yet.
I had Animal Crossing in your number 3 spot. So
okay,
that was much lower.
But still in the top 10.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on. Number 5 for me. We talked about this a little bit. Fall Guys. I had a lot of fun with Fall Guys. And I think the reason why I had so much fun with it is because I have tried and tried and tried again to get into battle royales, and it just never clicks. I can't win, and therefore I get upset and I get frustrated and I just put the thing down. Fall Guys feels like the great equalizer. Even if you're not like the top player of, or like the top, I don't know, 5% of players, you can still get the crown. You can still win just because of the dumb things that happen in this game. I mean, we talked about it already a lot, but like, I think I played more than you, I would imagine, because there were times whenever, well, maybe I think it probably evened out towards the
we're
end.
about the same, yeah.
Yeah, but like, I never really got tired of it. It's just other things started to like come out or be released or take my interest away.
Sure.
Like I could go back and play right now and still have.
Yeah, the thing about Fall Guys is I never got tired of it. I got tired of the modes. There weren't enough modes.
Yeah.
But now, when we're 3 seasons in, it's great. Great.
Yeah. Such a good game. And again, the huge thing for me is that like I can finally understand and appreciate a battle royale.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, that genre was just it was not on my checklist because I would do well, but never well enough to win. And it was the most frustrating thing, which like that drives people to not want to play it. So being able to actually win really helps.
Really does. It really does. My number 5 is a game that truly came out of nowhere. I didn't even intend on playing this game until I just decided to buy it randomly one day because Atlas kept telling me to, and apparently I just do whatever Atlas tells me to do. So I bought one game called 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, and boy, what a game. What a fucking ride that game is from start to finish. So amazing. The gameplay is like whatever. Like the combat section is fun enough. It's like not... It's probably 20% of the entire game. The rest of it is all adventure game, visual novel, storytelling kind of thing. But the gameplay section is totally fine. It's whatever. The other 80% of the game, though, incredible. There's one other game that I'm going to talk about on this list that sort of did something similar with like the way they handled the idea of time. But this game took that idea and turned it to like 15 on a 10-point scale. Because you play as 13 protagonists. 13 characters you play as, and you have to keep straight. And it takes a little bit before you do, but this is like a 40-hour game, I think, 40 or 50 hours it took. By hour 5, you're pretty okay. But like, not only are the characters all different, and they're all leading different lives, and they have their own like view of what's going on, the order you're playing their events in aren't necessarily in chronological order. There's also time, the idea of like time travel and the idea of alternate realities. And there's just a lot that all makes sense as you're playing. It doesn't make sense as you're playing it, but it never feels like you're overwhelmed with it. It always gives you enough of a carrot that's like, well, what the fuck is that about? I want to know what's going on over here. And it's just a constant state of that. Somehow, through like the 11th hour of the game, you really don't have a good idea of what's going on until you beat it. And then it all just clicks in. Like, you start to figure out little things like, maybe the idea of time travel isn't really time travel. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I think I might have an idea of what's going on there. But it doesn't really make sense until you get to the very end of the game and you figure out what it was all for. Like, they do such an awesome job with this story, somehow balancing 13 protagonists in a way that you start to connect with all of them. And I love all of them. They're all great characters. And the interactions they have with each other are great. And it's so unique. This is a game that I want to shout at people to play. I've said that every time I've talked about it on this podcast, because it's not going to get the respect that it deserves. It was nominated for a Game Award, and I think I've seen it on a lot of people's lists, like individual people that have top 10 lists. Yeah. But it didn't get nominated for like any major outlet. Really.
By the actual industry.
Yeah. So it's a game that I really do feel like is for everybody. It sounds like an anime game. It's coming from Atlas. I know that I'm the Persona guy at this point. I'm like, I know that that's a thing. This isn't really that though. It's not even really an anime art style. It's this like pastel, almost painting kind of thing. And yes, it takes place in Japan, but the characters and the story are so Western. It is sci-fi in the most Western of ways. In ways you would never expect it to be. With Men in Black and E.T. references. Like, that's not something that you think about like Japanese people liking or like being a part of Japanese culture. And yeah, it deals with like mechas and with some other like Japanese sci-fi tropes too, but there is a lot of Western sci-fi here. If you are a sci-fi person, if you like Star Wars, if you like Star Trek, if you like anything sci-fi related, there's something in this game for you because they take all of those tropes, all of them. They don't leave a single thing out, and they all put it in this one thing that somehow works at the end of the day. So I really want more people to play that game, but
it's an impressive feat.
Yeah.
Alrighty, number 4. I can officially join you in being very upset with the Game Awards last year because my number 4 is Fire Emblem 3 Houses. I think I played it. I think that might have been like the first game I played this year. And if I had played it a month prior, it would have been in my probably top 3, maybe even game of the year for last year. It's such a good game. There's the character interaction is really what makes it. Seeing all these characters and all their relationships grow and develop, and like, I think the thing that surprised me the most was that there's a time skip. I didn't really realize until after the time skip how much my actions or inactions in certain areas would affect the later game.
Yeah.
Mostly in terms of recruiting people. I didn't realize that there were going to actually be like potentially repercussions or consequences to certain things. If I had known that, I might have tried a little bit harder. But I do. It's insane because it's what, like a 50, how long is it, like 60 70 hours?
Man, my playthrough I think was like 70 hours. Yeah,
I think mine was in the 70s as well, and that was for just one route. There are like 3.5 really like 4 routes. There's 4 routes, but like there's 3 main routes, and then there's like a half route and a half route.
But now with the
would you agree?
Right, yeah. With the DLC, there's like an extra half route or whatever.
Yeah. So there's not 4 routes. There's 3 routes and a half route and a half route.
Yeah.
So I've really experienced a quarter of what this game has to offer, and I feel so fulfilled. And I like that 70 hours was well spent. There's one route that I would probably never pick, personally, just because I don't know. I'm the kind of person who would go back and just be like, all right, I played this route, but I really liked it, so I'm just going to play it again.
I'm that exact same person, and anybody that's played this game is going to understand what you're talking about because we both played Crimson Flower, which is the Edelgard route, and you know what happens in that route.
Yes.
And you know the main antagonist, well, maybe not the main antagonist, but one of the antagonists in that route, if you pick a different route, it's going to be the opposite thing that happens, right?
Yeah.
The thing
I would never pick that route.
Neither would I.
There's like the wild card route that I would consider just because it seems like almost the neutral, like you have either, like you just said, you pick the route where you have a protagonist and then the other person becomes the protagonist or antagonist, and then you can flip it around. There's one route where it's just like, all right, they're gonna observe these 2 people doing their thing, but really they're off on their own. they've got other issues. Yeah, that's the route I would consider going and playing.
Right.
I don't know if I ever would.
No, I mean, I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. I'm only ever gonna play Crimson Flower if I play that game ever again.
Yeah.
The thing is, though,
the only difference is I would recruit more people.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you think that you know the other route. Like, you think you know what that person is dealing with, right? Like, you have your idea of what the person that becomes the antagonist is about. but
what their ambitions are and like
right. But when you
what
actually, and I haven't, I've read the other stories or whatever. But like all of my friends that played this game, all of my other friends played all three routes, and like from their perspective, there really isn't a right and a wrong here. Like they both, all of their intentions are totally correct.
Yeah.
And in my heart, Edelgard is like, her route is my route, and she's the people's, the people's empress. And like that, what happens at the end of the game is like how I would want it to go as a radicalized fucking whatever I am apparently. Comrade Edelgard. But yeah, what a great game.
It's so good. I feel like there was something else I was going to say, but it's lost to me now. I just love it.
I do want to play that game again.
It was so fun.
It was. Number 4 for me is Final Fantasy VII Remake, a game that I had never played. I never played Final Fantasy until Final Fantasy VII I never played until the remake. So I never had that nostalgia growing up with it. I have, by John's reaction, I'm thinking that he thought this was in one of my top 3 games.
So close. One off.
What a fantastic game. What a fantastic world. I really wish that I grew up playing this game, because I would, like, if I had experienced Final Fantasy VII as a child and got this year, it would have fucking blown my mind. Like, the way that this game is, when they tell you that they're taking the original game and breaking it up into however many episodes it's eventually going to be, you would think that, like, this is going to be either way too short or bloated or whatever, and it's not. It is a perfect length. It's not really that long. It at no point feels like you're wasting time doing like grinding or anything like that. The world is terrific. Midgar as a place is just amazing. Like the idea of the city and how entrenched capitalism gets into the city, and the idea of like the upper city and the lower city and what that means from a class perspective. There's just so much political, there's so much to dig into this from like a political philosophy stance, and from like a whole bunch of things. But then like you get the characters who are stupid and amazing, and the storyline, from what I've experienced of it so far, has been really engaging and fun. It's like loud, bombastic action movie fun. Ridiculous like enemies that you're fighting, ridiculous situations that you're in. But it's all set in this like really charming world that's fucked up in a way, but then it's made better by the people you're with, really. And yeah, characters that, you know, I know about Cloud, and I know about Barrett, and I know about Tifa, and I kind of had an idea about Aerith, just because I'm a gamer and those are really popular gaming characters. But like actually getting to meet them and know what they're about is a really awesome experience. If you have no connection to Final Fantasy VII, play this game, please, because I think you'll like it. Another one of those games that, like, okay, it's a Japanese game. Okay, it's maybe has some anime influence. But again, it takes so much influence from the West that it really just feels like... It doesn't feel like somebody that has an anime barrier. Even if you have an anime barrier and you have no interest in that, you're probably still going to like this game.
Yeah. So we're here, the top 3.
Top 3.
Oh boy. My number 3. It's the last outdated game on this list. I think it's probably the oldest one. And it kind of pairs up with one of my regular mentions. But that was A Link Between Worlds for the 3DS. This game came out and it was extremely well received. People loved the art style, people loved the gameplay, people loved basically everything about it. A lot of people I know said that this was one of the best modern Zelda games, especially in the like top-down kind of a style that a lot of the older Zelda games were in. And for the longest time I put off playing it because I knew that it was a spiritual successor to A Link to the Past, but I felt that it was only right if I played A Link to the Past first. And so that's why I played A Link to the Past and made it a point to play it this year. And that's how it kind of ended up on this list in my mentions. But A Link Between Worlds did so many things right. I think it was probably the first Zelda game where you could pick the order that you did the dungeons or temples in. There wasn't like a linear path that you had to follow. There were, I think, seven dungeons that you had to do, but you could go and do them in whatever order you wanted. If you got stumped on one, you could just leave and find another one. No big deal. There was a system that at first I hated, and it was the you could like rent out essentially the weapons. And I was like, this is stupid. I hate this. It's Zelda. I should have the weapon permanently. But as soon as I like got annoyed about it, they were like, hey, by the way, if you pay like double the price of the rental fee, you can just keep it. And I was like, oh, okay. I was worried that I was going to be annoyed this entire playthrough about this, but you solved the one gripe I had, so thank you. But like just the mechanic of like having it be a top-down Zelda game, but throwing in that like I don't know what the right word is, but being able to just go on walls and be a painting and like open up so much more of the world. It's such a simple thing, such a simple concept, but it really did completely change the game. It opened it up way more than it should have. Plus all the callbacks, like again, it was a spiritual successor to A Link to the Past, but I really do feel like if you played A Link to the Past, you were rewarded when you played A Link Between Worlds. There was no like direct knowledge you felt that you were missing. It was all just subtle little things. There were like secret caves in the original that if you knew where they were, they contained a new secret that wasn't necessary but was nice in this new title. And then there were characters that like carried over, or maybe it was their descendant or something. But regardless, there was a lot of reward for longtime Zelda fans that didn't feel exclusionary to people who had just gotten into the franchise and had never played the old one. So I felt like it was a very, very healthy balance between rewarding people like me and also not having a barrier or gatekeeping from people who are newer to the franchise or just younger and never got a chance to experience this older thing. So definitely probably my favorite Zelda for a like top down kind of style game. It was just so well done.
Sure. Number 3 for me, I think, is going to maybe be a little bit of a shocker. The Last of Us Part 2. Number 3.
It is kind of shocking. The number is what makes it shocking.
Yeah, right. I am not one of the people that is vehemently against The Last of Us. Do I think that the development cycle could have been handled differently? Absolutely. A crunch is never a good thing. Do I think that Neil Druckmann is like this evil man that like is just like terrorizing his employees? Absolutely not. If you've ever heard Neil Druckmann talk for 2 seconds, I think that you understand that he's not. And if you hear the way his employees talk about him, I think you understand that he's not. I don't know about that. But, yeah, the game never disappointed me in any way. Naughty Dog told the story that they wanted to tell. And I understand that some people didn't like that because of a character that...
It wasn't the story they wanted to hear.
It wasn't the story they wanted to hear, but it was the story that not only... Like, it was like Naughty Dog as a studio wanted to tell. It was Neil's story, but it wasn't just Neil's story. It was Troy and Ashley's story, too. It was Ellie and Joel's story. Maybe it wasn't the story you wanted, but it was. And they introduced another character that was polarizing, played by Laura Bailey, and she won the fucking Game Award for Best Performance this year, which tells you she did an amazing job with it. And she was an amazing character in that game. And if you were in this really fucked up situation where with a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland, and the character that you like did something against your father, maybe you would feel differently in the situation. Maybe think about that for 2 seconds. But there are people that are like, oh, that was out of character. Like the characters in this game were super out of character compared to the last game, or why would they do that? Just think about it for more than 2 seconds. Like, seriously.
There's a lot of mental stress. If you put yourself realistically into some of these situations that these video game characters are in, just the sheer stress and force on your mind.
Yeah.
would make you make decisions that in a sane state you'd be like, what, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that?
Right. And on top of that, it's been a minute. It's been years since the end of The Last of Us. So like the main characters have changed since then, because since then they are living in a situation that is, for the most part, a normal existence. They don't have to deal with this a post-apocalyptic wasteland, really. It's a weird situation. So they're in a different headspace. There are complaints about the way the game is structured. I think personally that added to the experience. I mentioned this with 13 Sentinels, but the game is not played chronologically. The game is played in chunks. And it's never like nebulous as to when the chunks take place, but they could have done that in a couple different ways, and I think that the way they did it is the best way. It does feel like the game ends 3 times because you don't know that next part is coming.
Yeah.
Like you experience something and it seems like the game ended, but then you start the game again, essentially in a new place. And it's really interesting. And I do think that ultimately the final scene of the game between Ellie and Joel, the final scene of the game that again takes place in a different time, it brings everything together in a way that just like it's such a reflective experience. After I beat that game, I went and I listened to every podcast that somebody did about it, like every spoiler cast. I listened to everything that Neil and Troy and Ashley were on to get their perspective and to see what they were thinking when they did certain things. And it's like, it's the first time since like high school English where I was forced to explicate famous works of literature that I've had that desire to like go in and really, I like analyze the themes and analyze what was going on and like the character development and all of that kind of stuff. Like I appreciate that stuff when I play games, but I really wanted to dig deep into this game because there's so much to analyze from a critical perspective. So amazing game. It's not my game of the year though.
I didn't think it'd be your game of the year. I thought it would be number 2.
I expected it, honestly, to be my game of the year. Like 2 months ago, it probably would have been my game of the year. But things change.
All right. My number 2 is a game that I think was on your most honorable list. It's a game that I picked up about, 2 weeks ago. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I, over the course of 12 days, put 65 hours into it without realizing it. And that is Hades. I absolutely love it. And again, one of the big things for me is that just like Fall Guys was finally the game that allowed me to enjoy BRs, Hades really got the roguelike for me. Because I played Dead Cells earlier this year and like I enjoyed it for, 20 hours, but then I got burnt out whenever I got to the final boss one time, and it was like I was hitting him with a stick. I was doing nothing, and I felt so defeated by that, because I knew that if I had wanted to actually beat it, I would need to spend so much more time getting so many more permanent upgrades and just get the perfect like number of upgrades during a run that fit my playstyle, and the odds of that happening were so low. But Hades got it right for me. That it was complex enough to have a bunch of different play styles, but also kept it like realistic in terms of like beatability and being able to complete a run. Like I never felt that I had to give up on a run because the 3 upgrades that I got from the very start just set me up for failure. It always felt like I would be able to beat a run regardless of what I started with and regardless of what just RNG gave me. Like it never felt like the game was basically setting me up to be screwed.
It respected you in your time.
Yeah. And so I mean, the story and the character development and like all the dialogue between all the characters, not even necessarily dialogue that was like story building, just some of the periphery dialogue where you'd finish a run, you'd come back and you'd talk to somebody and they would just tell you about something random. And it was like, this doesn't really relate to your quest line, but this fleshes you out as a character so much more. And I mean, going back to what you said earlier, the narrator, he's such a little shit. But like the back and forth between him and Zagreus is so great. Like it's the perfect amount of breaking the fourth wall for me. Because there are games that do that over the top and like kind of ruin it. But then there's obviously games that don't do it at all, and you're like, all right, let's have some humor here, please. Come on. But it just everything about the game was done perfectly for me. And I see why people enjoy it so much. I see why so many streamers have latched onto it. For a hot minute there, I was like, man, maybe I should get a capture card and like just stream this game for a little bit, because like every run does feel different, and I still feel like there are rewards waiting for me if I keep on doing runs. And I've gotten the true ending. Like I've beaten the game X number of times that you need to beat it to get the quote unquote ending. But there's still more. There's still more stuff I can do, and there's still relationships I can see develop. And I plan to do that and pursue that, but I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break after realizing that I had put 65 hours into this game.
It truly is a surprising game that I hope it moves to other platforms too.
Oh,
like right
sure.
now it's only on,
and the whole being able to cross save or whatever, where you can access your stuff. If I bought it on Steam, I could just start from where I left off on the Switch. That is an absolute godsend.
Yeah.
Because I cannot imagine restarting this now.
Yeah, and I would love to play it with just like ridiculous FPS, like the frame rate's super high, and it's already a visually stunning game, but like to have that extra power and to have it in 4K too, that would be great.
Yeah. And the only other thing I really want to mention about it, and I think we talked about this before, but all of the characters, their dialogue and their voice acting is so perfect, because yes, they are talking like somebody from ancient Greek would talk, but they're also doing it in a way that's very relatable, whether that's their tone or maybe the way that they phrase something. Like, yeah, you have the Lord of the Dead, the King of the Underworld, Hades, but like he just sounds like a tired dad.
He's so fucking tired, dude. He's like, my fucking shit son just wants to keep going up there, and I keep telling him it doesn't matter that he wants to go up there, but he won't goddamn listen to me.
Like, to be able to put that mythological thing into a voice that I could hear at like a T-ball game today, if I were to go and listen in on like the dads being like, he
you have to run the other way.
I tell him to not be afraid of the ball, but what does he do? He's afraid of the ball every time.
Yeah.
Like, it comes from a place of love, but
yeah,
it's just, it was so well done, because it's easier, I think, to just go with the Greek motif and the mythological motif and be like, oh no, they're gods. They talk in a dignified way, and they speak in a dignified way, and blah blah blah. But to be like, all right, they're gods, but like they're also relatable.
Yeah.
It was so well done, and that's for everybody. You hear Dionysus and you're like, all right, here we got Mr. Frat Boy over here, like
Zagreus, my bro,
drinking his wine. He's just chilling out, having a good time. Wants to have some drinks. All of them were just brilliantly voiced and brilliant. The dialogue was great.
They're all so fucking sexy too. Why are they all so good looking? I understand they're Greek gods. That's how they're always supposed to look. But everybody in that game can get it.
I know, it's true. And it's like, Dionysus, all you do is drink wine. How do you have like such chiseled pecs and abs? You should be just a big ball of wine.
Yeah. Yep.
But they're gods.
Yep.
So
my number 2, another shocker that came out of nowhere, but Yakuza Like a Dragon is my number 2 game of the
almost
year.
Put that on instead of Final Fantasy VII. Damn it.
Yeah. Yakuza really just came out of fucking nowhere. I've talked about this. I don't want to go into me playing the Kiryu games again, but I had an idea about what the series was like, and finally playing a soft reboot, I now understand like actually why the series is so beloved. And you know, for the first, it's a very long game. I think I pegged it, I beat it probably somewhere around the 50-hour mark, probably. For the first like probably 2/3 of the game, so the first 20 hours or so, 25 hours, 30 hours, somewhere around there. Um, it's fun and it's engaging and you keep wanting to play it because the story's interesting. It just seems like a crime drama, and there's these likable characters in it, and there's a lot of goofy shit that happens in a lot of the side missions, and it's just fun. It's a fun game. But then you get to the third act of the game, and it's insane. The third act of the game is so well written, and there's so many hype moments, and there's so many emotional, like, character driven, I guess just emotionally driven character moments that you don't really expect this game to have. I mentioned this when I had beat it, but the last scenes of the game, the last 20 minutes of the game or so, the last cutscenes between the main character and this other character is some of the best acting I've ever seen. I'm sure they mocapped these scenes too, but the voice acting is so heartfelt and you can feel the emotion. And like, it's some of the most powerful acting, just pure acting period, that I've ever seen. Compare it to acting in whatever movie from whatever actor or actress won whatever Academy Award. Like, this is up there. At least, and I'm sure it came across. Cece's not in the chat right now, but when we played, when I streamed it, there was a scene and we had a conversation about the sub versus the dub event, essentially. And like the English cast, I'm sure did a great job, but the Japanese voice cast cannot be commended high enough for this. And the third act of the game, this is the part that put it above The Last of Us for me. Like, The Last of Us is like Naughty Dog, that is their thing. The narrative is their thing. That's why you play Naughty Dog games. It's for the narrative.
Yeah.
Yakuza for 2/3 of the game is not that. It's definitely not at that level. It feels more like something out of GTA maybe.
Sure.
But that last act of the game pulls it all together in the most incredible of ways. So it's something that blew me away, quite literally. I still think about it. It's been confirmed that Ichiban is going to be the main character of the Yakuza franchise going forward. They haven't said what that really means, but at least for the next couple of games, we have something to look forward to. So excited for that. Play that game. All y'all out there.
So that brings us to our games of the year.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. My game of the year is a game that the genre, I would never have thought I would put this at a game of the year, but here we are. Probably unsurprisingly, it is The Legend of Zelda: Age of Calamity. That game, the only reason I put that game down was because I got 100% of everything. I had logged like 70 to 80 hours and I had finally finished everything. And I was like, all right, I guess there's no more. So that's why I'm putting this game down. It's rare whenever I will play something for that long and the reason I put it down is because I have just done everything. Normally I'll just be burnt out, or the stuff left will be just too grindy. This game took the Warriors idea of just fighting all these huge mobs and put it in the frame of a giant war that you had only heard about in Breath of the Wild. And it included all these amazing characters and like all this relationship development and all this character development between these characters that you wish you had gotten to see as you played Breath of the Wild. I think that's one of the huge things for me, is that it paired so nicely with Breath of the Wild because it gave you an appreciation for why things might have seemed so somber and so empty in Breath of the Wild, and it's because it was full of life at one point, and then this happened. And if like you seem if Link seems maybe upset or like maybe depressed at certain times, look at it, look at his history, like especially in this incarnation or whatever, all of his friends are gone.
Sure.
But regardless, seeing them all grow and like become the champions in Age of Calamity was an absolute joy and an absolute delight. Obviously, it always feels great in a Warriors game to just hit 3 buttons and just destroy a mob of lower level enemies.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is like super, if this happens that often, but I do feel like for the more mid-tier and boss enemies, there was more thought and care put into them and like the fights and how they work. Because it wasn't just like, all right, hack and slash and grind away at their health bar. There were certain things you could do that would trigger weak points, and like there was actual thought. It wasn't just, all right, hit, dodge. There's a weakness bar, hit it until it breaks, and then you can get like an extra strike in or something. Like there were certain things that they would do, and it would prompt you. It'd be like, hey, this carrier's this kind of boss thing is charging at you. Use this ice skill real quick. And like there was more thought and more skill put into these fights, I think, than historically there have been.
Sure.
The other huge thing, and I pretty much already discussed this, but Warriors games, as you and I well know, are typically just fan service and reskinned. They're the same game, but just reskinned so that it's whatever franchise you enjoy. This one actually had a coherent story that like meshed with the source material, and I'm sure that Nintendo was very, very particular about this, but it was done so well, and it feels like it feels like the who is it?
Koei
Tecmo. Yeah. It feels like if they keep this level of attention to detail going forward, you could see Warriors games become a lot more prevalent.
In the West, and especially.
Yeah, for sure. And it feels like it would start here with how they treated and how well received Age of Calamity was.
I am very excited for Persona 5 Strikers in about a month.
We will see if it follows the formula, because if it does, good things. Very, very good things. But it was just so good. And then the way that they took the themes, like the more subdued musical themes from Breath of the Wild, and just absolutely hyped them up in this game was a pleasure to the ears. But I don't want to just gush about this game forever. It was my game of the year. Again, it's a rare thing for me to put a game down after 70 hours because I'm out of content.
Sure. Yeah, that's not surprising.
Yep.
Also probably not surprising is my game of the year, which is Persona 5 Royal.
Yeah.
I debated back and forth what I wanted to do with this game because honestly, it probably doesn't deserve Game of the Year by virtue of what it added to Persona 5. Is it the definitive version of Persona 5? Absolutely it is. If you don't want to pay for it, if you get a PlayStation 5, you can play Persona 5 for free via the PlayStation Plus collection, and that'll be fine. But if you want the definitive version of the game that's markedly better than Persona 5, when Persona 5 is already a 10 out of 10 game, this is the game to get. Do I think that makes it, is that like worth $60 when I bought it? I actually bought it twice, and I bought like the collector. I spent way too much money on this game. Do I think it was worth all that? For me, as a fucking fan of this game, yes. For the average person, I don't think so. It should have just been a DLC, but Atlas likes money, so this is what we get. And like, because of all that, I thought about just not including it at all on my list, like I did last year with my 2 lists, one that had Persona, one that didn't. I thought about doing it that way, but then at the end of the day, I was just like, you know what, this is my list. It came out this year. This is now the game that has succeeded Persona 5, is now my favorite game of all time. So this is now at the top of my list when I talk about my favorite games of all time. This is it. I'm just going to have it be on here. This is just my life. So, Persona 5 Royal. Everything I just said about it. That the definitive version of the game adds so much content that all feels worthwhile. It never feels like more bloat. It streamlines some things that, cut down on the playtime while also increasing the amount of content. So it's not like it's a ton more commitment over the original Persona 5.
Basically the same.
Essentially.
Maybe a little bit longer, but not like not what, it's a whole nother semester or something that they added in.
Yeah, I mean they do add a third semester, but it's not like you play through the whole thing. Like the third semester would start on New Year's and go through usually March, I guess. But
okay,
there's time skips in there, so you're not playing that whole time. But yeah, my original playtime I think was like 96 hours in Persona 5, and this one it was like 120 hours. But I know plenty of people that played the original Persona 5 and had 120 hour first runs. So I don't know.
I think that was closer to mine. I think I'd have to look, but my first run I think was in the definitely over 100. I don't think it was quite to the 120s, but maybe like the 1-teens.
Yeah, so for me it was more time, but I don't know that necessarily has to be more time. I think it's very similar. Because it does streamline other things that make everything easier. So the game by far is a lot easier than Persona 5. There are some like annoying things that are a little bit harder with one boss fight in particular. But yeah, it's so great. Again, that series is so important to me now, and the characters are so lovable. It's an incredibly engaging story. You really can't go wrong with it. So, very personal game to me. Very powerful game. And congratulations, Atlas, for once again getting my game of the year.
Oh, boy. All right, so my predictions for your top 3 was, and actually I put it in the order that I thought it was going to be as well. I don't know if you did that.
Yeah, I did.
But I put Final Fantasy VII Remake as number 3 for you, The Last of Us Part 2 as number 2, and Persona 5 Royal as number 1.
Okay.
So mad that Final Fantasy VII got number 4.
Yeah, so you got my number 1 right, and then 2 was off because of Yakuza, and then 3 was off because of
it was number 4. Right. Yeah. So I got 2 of them right, not necessarily the right order. And then one of them was outside of your top 3, but in your top 10.
Yeah, I was very similar. I thought that because of Hades' clout, it was going to get the nod for you over your Zelda, over Age of Calamity. I had Hades at number 1, Age of Calamity at 2, and then 3 I had Animal Crossing.
Very fair. If I don't know, it's a real close race between Hades and Age of Calamity for me, honestly. I just had so much fun playing
and
each
that's the thing. Same with Persona. Like do I think that this game should win Game of the Year at IGN? No, but it's my list.
But it's your list. That's the thing.
So yeah,
we're not answering to anybody.
Right. Like I said, all 18 of these games that I talked about tonight were 9 or 10 out of 10 games. I think that every game on my top 10 list, I would have it as a 10 out of 10. Like Fall Guys, while not a perfect game, it's a blast.
Yeah.
That's my number 10. I would put that as 10. I would say that's a perfect game. It's a great game. It's a 10, probably. So yeah,
all the games that we've discussed, at the very least, I would recommend anybody checking out.
Same.
If you have not already.
Absolutely. Yep. What was your game of the year? Let us know on Twitter. I am at Josh Clasen on Twitter. I have my name back. I got my name back because I was tired of saying it wrong on the podcast. So guess what? I'm at Josh Clasen again. John is at John Kuminko. Let us know in the comments on the YouTube video. Let us know on Twitter what your game of the year was. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? I don't want any Naughty Dog haters in here, though. If you just get on here and you're like, Joel, Ellie. Yeah, I don't want that. Get that out of there. Stay away. Everybody else, though, if you want to have an intelligent conversation, let me know. Let us know what your game of the year is. If you like what you heard, you can find this podcast on all of your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube and Twitch for video. We will be back on Tuesday with another episode of QuickTime Event Plays Persona 4 Golden. Gonna have a lot of story content. Gonna have a lot of voice acting probably in this next episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get my big glass.
Yeah, if you want to come and see John and I pretend to voice act for 4 hours, join us for Persona 4 Golden. And then we will be back next Thursday with QuickTime Event, and we are going to be talking next Thursday about a little bit of a retrospective on the year. How did we change as gamers? What do we like now after experiencing 2020? So we'll have that to talk about next week. If you have any topics you want us to discuss, let us know. Come join the Discord server. Come have a ball in the Discord server.
Good time.
Anything else for the good of the order, John?
No, that's it for me.
Thank you for joining us. We will see you all next week.
Goodbye, friends.